everybody. Welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. Today, we have management provocateur, the one and only Doug Kirkpatrick, who is uh, a luminary, my estimation, I think others as well, in the business management space and has been let's say, bucking at the constraints of traditional management for, I would say, a lifetime. He was one of the key leaders at a Morningstar that actually transformed that organization into this incredibly vertically integrated food processor, self-managed case study for the ages. He's also a author. He has three books: Beyond Empowerment, From Hierarchy to High Performance, and the No Limits Enterprise. Uh, Doug Kirkpatrick, I'm ready to get into it with you. What's going on, my man?
Josh, fantastic to see you. Great pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite. Just back from a whirlwind trip to Portugal and Spain, working vacation, speaking at the World Management Agility Forum in Lisbon, and then just back about a week ago, and here in California, resuming work
Yes.
about the future of work.
The work about the future of work. So, there's so many areas, so many ways we can kind of get into this. I have been observing um, since the pandemic, a massive transformation in the way people are thinking about work, and we're struggling with it. I think businesses are struggling with it, and they're saying, "No, you got to come back to the office. No, we're going to do it this way. We're going to experiment." And I don't feel like the chips have fallen, right? I don't feel like we're settled, and I wanted to have you on because you've been thinking about a different way and exploring a different way of how businesses should run for a long, long time, and we're now seeing more and more companies going, "Oh, actually, maybe that is the way we should be doing it." Can you give us a little background, sort of where you came from, how you arrived at this idea, and then talk to us about what's going on, what you're seeing occurring in the market now?
Sure. Um, how I ended up doing what I do is that over 30 years ago, I was very fortunate to meet a young entrepreneur here in California named Chris Roofer, who was starting a high-tech food processing company. And just got out of college and looking for something to do. And so I joined his core team. And we started a little food processing company in Northern California here, processing tomatoes. And the company was fairly successful. I was the financial controller. And we got up to about $100 million in sales. But we had defaulted to the traditional command and control management structure that has been prevalent since the 1840s. And so our founder, Chris, was at the top of the pyramid as a managing partner. And then we had a layer of managers, of which I was one. And we had a production manager, marketing manager, et cetera. And then we had a layer of supervisors who conducted factory operations. And then we had a layer under the supervisors of coordinators to chunk down instructions to the working folks at the bottom of the pyramid who did all the real work. And so we muddled along, reasonably successful from a financial point of view, but a little bit frustrating from the standpoint of structure. And we just started noticing things as we went along. And one of the things we noticed is that when people came to work, um, they'd park their cars, go into the factory and start work. Every one of those people is already a manager in their own personal lives. So every one of those people is already making gigantic life-altering decisions on their own without a boss. They're deciding who to date, who to marry, what to do for a living, whether to buy a house, car, have children, or whatever. And somehow they do that without a boss. It's only when they enter the portal of the workplace, I guess they're incompetent to accomplish anything unless they subjected themselves to bosses. And so we collected these insights, and then in 1990, well, actually 1988, Chris left to start a new venture. And in 1990, February of 1990, I joined him. The new venture is called Morningstar. And so we were working out of a tiny little farmhouse on a dusty canal bank here in Northern California. And one day in March, Chris came into the farmhouse and said, I'd like to have a meeting of colleagues and talk about organization. And at the time, there were 24 of us. I was the only admin type. We had a core team of 24. We met with him at night in a double wide construction trailer on the job site. We sat around in a circle on folding chairs. He handed out a document called the Morningstar Team Principles. And we reviewed those and realized they really boiled down to two principles. The first principle is that people shouldn't use force or coercion against other human beings, which is foundational to all law everywhere in the world. Assault, battery, theft, and burglary, kidnapping, murder, and all the rest. The second principle was that people should keep the commitments they make to each other. Say you're going to do something, you do it, which is foundational to civil law. Contract law would mean nothing but for that principle. And so we discussed, debated, had a dialogue for a couple hours, and the end of the evening, we just kind of looked around the circle and realized, these principles are self-evident. We have no objections. They make perfect sense. And so we adopted them as pretty much the entire governance of the enterprise. And when we filed out of the trailer, we were a self-managed enterprise at that moment. Now, this was March of 1990. We still had a ton of work to do. We had thousands of acres of tomatoes coming up out of the ground for 300 miles up and down the state of California. We had vital equipment arriving on ocean cargo freighters out in the Atlantic Ocean waiting to go through the Panama Canal. We had to hire hundreds of people to operate the factory and drive the trucks. And we had hundreds of construction workers on the job site 24/7, constructing and fabricating and pulling wire and all the rest. But finally, on July 16th of that year, 1990, we turned on the factory and we produced about 90 million pounds of industrial tomato concentrate for the world market. And we changed the cost structure of the entire industry pretty much overnight. And we did it without a single human boss. No bosses, no managers, no supervisors, no titles, zero command authority. And we created a product that I believe everyone by this time in North America and around the world has eaten, which is a product that goes into everything you can think of in the grocery store, from ketchup to salsa, pizza sauce, barbecue sauce, steak sauce, spaghetti sauce, and thousands of other products. And we expanded. We built another factory, then another factory. We expanded operations up and down the supply chain toward customers and remote warehouses and toward the supply in terms of farming, transplanting, and harvesting and trucking. We did it without a single human boss, no bosses of others, no designated managers, no vice presidents, no titles, zero command authority. And now we're the largest tomato processor in the world, $1 billion company with thousands of colleagues. We don't call them employees at Morningstar. No command authority. Two simple principles: don't use force and keep commitment. So people became interested in this. Gary Hamel wrote about us in the Harvard Business Review in December of 2011, described on the cover as the world's most creatively managed company. And so people want to know more. And
Right.
so I find myself telling the story.
All right. So I'm sure there's some folks who never heard this story before and are in disbelief that this is even possible. They might even call you a liar, perhaps. Let me
No, they
ask.
do.
They
They
do.
have.
Yes, they do.
Absolutely.
That's right. It's
Absolutely.
impossible, Doug. It's
Uh,
impossible, right?
yeah.
So the folks that are harvesting, that are picking the day laborers, let's say, and you can correct me, I'm just making presumptions. I'm assuming using day laborers or contractors of some sort. Are they also no boss? Do they also have their own? Are they also self-directed? And how does that work?
Yeah, so Morningstar is a highly seasonal operation. It operates in a high season of 3.5 months, which is essentially early July through mid-October. It swells from about 500 year-round colleagues to about 2,500 um, seasonal colleagues in addition. And those seasonal colleagues are subject to the same principles as everyone else. They have the same voice as everyone else. There is no differentiation
Hmm.
in how they are treated or how they are subject to these core principles of not using force and keeping commitments. So no distinction, and they're referred to as colleagues because the word employees, literal dictionary definition of employee is someone who works for another person for pay,
Yeah.
according to dictionary.com. And so that's not an inspiring definition for anyone in Gen Z or anyone else for that matter. Everyone's considered a professional colleague. So there's no collar, there's no blue collar, white collar, there is
Right.
no collar.
Yeah.
People that clean the bathrooms have a voice that is equal to everyone else. They are considered professional colleagues just like everyone else. And that's really why this works.
How do they know what to do? How do employee if you don't have a boss, if you don't have someone telling you what to do, how do you know what to do? How do you disseminate information? And how do people choose to do the right thing?
Yeah, so information is disseminated through fairly rigorous orientation sessions. So seasonal colleagues go through an orientation, or if they're returning, a reorientation every year.
Okay.
And so they learn all the good manufacturing practices, safety practices, self-management practices, all the rest of it. That is reiterated year after year after year. Um, we have rigorous full-day self-management orientations for all new full-time year-round colleagues, as well as ongoing mini sessions, reminder sessions, brown bag lunch sessions of all kinds on a continuous basis, not never stops. And there are colleagues considered ambassadors of self-management distributed throughout the enterprise who are mentors and
Hmm.
information sharers on a continuous
Nodes.
ongoing basis, nodes of knowledge throughout the enterprise. And so people learn what their job is. In the seasonal colleague case, those jobs are discrete and often repetitive. And so learning the outlines of those jobs is reasonably straightforward.
Yeah.
In the case of colleagues with a broad range of commercial responsibility or working on a year-round basis, it definitely takes time, as it would in any job, to absorb the subject matter and understand the network and sources of help that are available from fellow colleagues throughout the network. So people are always offering on a contributory basis. They're generous assistance and mentorship and coaching to each other
Yeah.
because everyone does better when people are successful as individuals.
Okay. So, quality control issues either with the product or the humans. So we all know that being laid off or being putting on a PIP, a performance improvement plan, where this is all sort of a level of quality control, and there's often we have our annual reviews. How did you do this year? And your manager, and usually your manager, but you're reporting up or out and saying, this is how I'm doing. And people say, this is how you're doing. And what is the self-management approach to controlling the quality of the product and the humans?
So there is no control by of humans by other humans at Morningstar. It is the fundamental distinction between traditional management and self-management. In fact, the definition of traditional management derives from the French word manège, which means handler of horses.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the asymmetry of power is baked into the very word management in the first place.
Right.
Morningstar specifically eschews that definition and adopts the idea of self-management. So no one can put another person on a PIP because no one has that authority. In fact, no one has any unilateral authority to fire another person. No one has any unilateral authority to tell another person what to do,
Okay.
with the expectation their command will be obeyed. I can't go up to someone and say, stop doing X and start doing Y. Everything is accomplished by request and response. Anyone can make a request of another person, and people are free to respond to those requests and have an obligation to do so in whatever way makes sense. But you can't tell people what to do. So
Yeah.
that's a fundamental distinction between traditional companies and Morningstar. Um, so if we go through the idea of how do you handle performance, performance is a matter of self-management. Individuals identify metrics that make sense for themselves so they can play the game of work. And the metrics at Morningstar are called stepping stones because they're considered stepping stones toward perfection. Morningstar benchmarks perfection as opposed to other companies or other sectors or other industries because it believes that perfection is shooting for perfection unlocks blue sky innovation thinking,
Hmm.
and we have examples of that. So people measure themselves. They look at their own stepping stones, and they play the game of work. They use those as scorecards to play the game of work. At the end of the year, individuals have their scorecards, and they also have agreements that they've forged by and between fellow colleagues. Those are called colleague letters of understanding. They're contracts between colleagues. Those contracts are a complete and total replacement for bureaucracy. So Morningstar doesn't require the traditional pyramid structure and layers of management. It replaces that structure
Yeah.
with a network of contracts by and between peers.
Yeah.
At the end of the year, people get together, they share that information with the local compensation committee, and they negotiate for whatever salary increases or changes they desire. So everything's accomplished by request, response, negotiation, and there are processes in place to resolve differences of opinion as well. And so it's very much a peer-to-peer network, each peer having an equal voice in matters that affect them.
Yeah. Okay, so let's zoom out because obviously you could keep asking lots of questions about Morningstar. Um, has have there been any other organizations that have achieved self-management the way Morningstar? Let's say you're not a liar. Let's say this is true. Has have in all your time, is there any other organization that's done this, that's been able to either by directly having been influenced by Morningstar or maybe having done it on in their own? Have Do you have examples of other orgs? Is this a one-off, impossible to recreate?
I don't think it's a one-off, impossible to recreate, but I'm not aware of other enterprises of the scale of Morningstar
Mm-hmm.
that have adopted the same approach to self-management as Morningstar. Now, there
Why?
are lots of, pardon me,
Why? Why
why?
is that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think that that hasn't been replicated at that scale?
Yeah, I think there are approaches to other versions of self-management that have
Okay.
been successfully implemented. But people look at Morningstar as kind of an interesting case that doesn't make sense from a transition from a command and control to a self-managed state in terms of traditional management thinking. Part of it is people are so steeped in traditional management thinking, it's hard to even imagine a different way of working, especially one this radical. Um, Part of that has to do with neuroscience. We have uh, studies, psychology studies that talk about the desire for power and command authority. Dr. Keltner at UC Berkeley and his graduate students do studies in power dynamics, and they find that, oftentimes people develop an addiction to power.
Mm.
And so we see that show up in the business world all the time. And so if you enjoy the exercise of power and command authority, why would you want to give it up? It doesn't make sense. Ian Robertson wrote a book called The Winner Effect: How Power Affects Your Brain,
Mm.
and describes how individuals get a shot of dopamine in the brain when they exercise command authority. So how do you overcome that? Um, the only way you can do it is through bedrock principles, like you can't use force. And if you want to use force, this is not the organization for you to work in. And then we've got just 180 years of traditional management history
Yeah.
to overcome. So in 1841, there was a train wreck on the Western Railway and killed some people. They hired George Whistler, a civil engineer, to study it, and he borrowed ideas from the Prussian military and came out with the world's first, large-scale enterprise org chart and silos and command authority and departments and divisions and layers of management and all the rest. And that took hold throughout the entire Industrial Revolution. And then later on, companies split ownership from management and developed this professional managerial class.
Hmm.
And then we developed B schools that teach, management of other people. And so we got a lot to overcome if we
Yeah.
want to create radically different organizations.
One thing I noticed in the story that you told is it's not that you had this initial company and you didn't say, and we transformed it. You said we left and we started a new company, which I felt was very telling in that you felt like you had to make a break because and I'm just this is what I'm inferring, but tell me if this is true or incorrect if it's not. The systems were already in place. It was too difficult to change what everybody already understood, and so you had to leave and recreate it from scratch.
Yeah, I would say that's reasonably accurate. The founding mindset, the mindset of the principles involved and the history that had been built up over several years, it just would have been extremely challenging to overcome, and so much easier to implement idealistic, very idealistic self-management in a new greenfield organization. We
Yeah.
can start fresh and build on the idea of managing enormous complexity with great simplicity based on core human principles. And by the way, I think these two principles are the most important principles of human interaction. That's the reason Morningstar works. The two principles, not using force and keeping commitments, are to human beings what gravity is to physics. Because if you imagine a world where everyone aligned with the principle of not using force, we wouldn't need armies or navies or police or locks on our doors. And of course, that's, not realistic. That's not reality, but that's not really the point. The point is the closer we approach that ideal state, the more space we open up for human happiness and great Mondays and great culture and high performance and all the
Yeah,
good things of life.
yeah.
And the second principle, imagine a world where every single person always did what they said they were going to do 100% of the time. What an amazing world that would
Yeah,
be to live in. Of
yeah.
course, yeah, very idealistic, but but that's not really the
There's no
point.
reason,
The point
just
is,
because we're
the
not going to
better off we
achieve
are.
it doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, so here's this incredible possibility that is difficult to achieve. And you've been talking about it for 30 years. People have asked you to talk about it. There are other small scale examples that we might be able to get into in just a second, but what I found interesting and I think why this is relevant now is I believe whether they know it or not, organizations, I don't know, let's just use that term, humans, leaders, the people who are in charge are casting about for a new way to do things. Or maybe earlier in that kind of awareness, they're realizing that the way they're doing things now isn't working. And why? So let's start with why do you think? Okay, so let's assume I know that you know, or that you think traditional command and control management hasn't been working. Obviously, that's why you've dedicated your life to this. Why now are organizations does it feel like organizations are starting to go, or leaders are starting to go, oh wait, this isn't working, and maybe they don't know what this is, right? Like what they're talking about, but what is happening now in the world that is enabling more new ideas about how businesses are organized to start to creep in, do you think?
I think it's anxiety on the part of leaders. And to be fair, when we say things aren't working, traditional organizations created incredible wealth all around the globe and improved the lifespans of people everywhere in the world.
Okay.
And they did it, but they did it at the cost of creating organizations where people are disengaged and unhappy and unfulfilled at work.
Mm,
And so, what we're trying to create now are organizations that are human and allow people to be as creative and openly human as the human beings that work inside them. And so, what can we do? What can we do to make that better? Why has it been so destructive to
yeah.
the human
Yeah.
spirit?
Yeah.
How do we move forward, leadership wise? It starts with free will on the part of leaders. And
Free will.
my dear friend, Dr. Peter Kessenbaum, one of the great workplace philosophers, um, he's now 96, but in his prime, he worked with some of the biggest companies in the world and some of the most important CEOs in the world. And he consulted and coached them on the importance of courage. And the fuel for courage is anxiety. So the
Whoa, whoa,
challenge
let's
with
let's wait, I just want to restate that. The fuel for courage is anxiety. Okay, say
yeah,
more.
yeah, yeah. So everyone has anxiety. I think I've met one person in a workshop that claimed never to experience anxiety, but most of us sense anxiety. And the challenge with anxiety is we can allow it to paralyze us, or we can allow it to propel us forward. And so Aristotle said that anxiety is the fuel for courage. And so, how do we channel our anxiety in a productive way so it enables us to undertake great things? in the pursuit of making a better world and being better leaders. So we start with courage. It took courage to start Morningstar as a self-managed organization. It takes courage to transform an organization from a command and control monolith pyramid to a dynamic network of highly engaged influencers and individuals that want to do their best. They're highly engaged. So how do you do that? Courage is inner will, inner strength, inner resilience, fortitude, perseverance, all those things. And then Peter had an idea of a diamond. So the bottom of the diamond was courage fueled by anxiety. The top of the diamond he called ethics. So if courage is about yourself, ethics is about other people. It's caring, kindness, compassion, nurturing, support, empathy, and encouragement. And it's also about right and wrong, subjective ethics and but also about the actual, values of we're not going to lie, cheat, and steal or tolerate people that do. Um, so we're balancing the internal and the external, but then the left side of his diamond is reality. It's about having zero illusions. It's about clear, cold, transparent understanding of your current reality, the terrain upon which you're operating, your constraints, your resource constraints, your budgetary constraints, your human constraints, also your opportunities. It's also about understanding your own emotional state, the emotional states of the people with whom you work and interact. But of course, reality has a balance, and the balance is the right side of his diamond, and that's vision. And so it's a vision of a desired future state into which you can invite people to join you on a journey toward. It's not about command and control compulsion, forced march toward my vision, but it's about invitational leadership and shining a light on this desired future state and moving toward that. So balancing all these things leads to a word that you're familiar with, Josh, which is great. So it's about achieving greatness, the possibility of achieving greatness, noble significance in the world, creating a legacy that will last beyond your lifetime. We teach that model of leadership at Morningstar. We believe everyone is a leader or potentially a leader at Morningstar. And we want everyone to have the capacity to be a leader and in the pursuit of greatness. And so, if leaders can access that sort of vision and tap into that and channel their anxiety appropriately, and exercise courage. Courage is about taking bold risks. It's about defending people who aren't in the room. It's about taking stands that are unpopular. It's about, standing alone when you have to. But it's about doing the right thing. And we need leaders that do that if we're going to move into the new world of work.
Two more, two more chapters in our conversation that I want to get to. The last I'm going to ask you for how can a leader or a manager inside of an organization that is not Morningstar can start to make some changes. So that'll be the last thing we end on. But the second to last is about the other part of the shift. So we started by talking about the what is it that we're realizing that this isn't working, whatever this may be. The other part is the humans in the equation, the workers, the people who are doing the work, whether you call them associates or employees, and I think that what you're seeing, you have a hunch that as we move on from the boomers and Gen Xers and even millennials who may be willing to or assume that the right thing to do is to suffer through work. Work is, a place that you go to do work. We're now, and we heard years ago, we started to hear about folks that wanted purpose. They wanted to sign up to an organization that had purpose. And I feel like the pandemic really helped people rejigger their understanding. And so, is it your conception that we're looking at younger millennials, um, Gen Z, and even Gen Alpha are not just desiring a meaningful place to work, but will full on reject traditional management models, or will choose not to, will choose to go out on their own, or some other alternative? Is am I describing the way that you see the world correctly there?
So, we go back to free will. Individuals are going to choose what they tolerate and how they approach work in whatever way they choose. And no one will choose it for them. They're going to have to make that decision themselves as individuals. Um, but you touched on something really important, and that is that Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and I think all the generations um, benefit hugely and will be seeking meaning from work. And meaning is a really deep and important concept. When people can tap into their meaning, their sense of meaning, then they are able to transcend time itself. Most people experience time as a source, something alien to themselves. It's a source of external pressure, and it comes in the form of deadlines and directives and all the other things that people experience in the traditional workplace. But if we can help people tap into a personal sense of meaning that's generated from what they do, solving problems, creating innovations, creating value for others, uh, being able to give generously to their colleagues and customers and stakeholders, uh, tap into what's meaningful to them as individuals, then their sense of time is generated internally and they become time. And they can create what Peter Kessenbaum calls the immortality project, which is creating something that's great that lasts beyond your own lifetime. So that's my mission in life, is to help as many people tap into their own personal sense of meaning as humanly possible. That's what Peter's life was all about as well. Um, and that's the challenge of our times. And Peter would say, if you can't find meaning in your current job, uh, you should try. Try to find meaning in your current job. And if you still can't find meaning in your current job, then you should leave and find something that's meaningful to you, even if it leads to poverty.
Hmm. That's quite a that's quite a statement. That's quite a value statement, I guess. Even if it leads to poverty, because what's the rejoinder there? What is, I mean, I'm assuming it's your soul is rich or something like that. That's, I mean, that's tough. That's very antithetical to a lot of the mindset of, well, I mean, probably most everybody, unless you're a
Yeah,
Buddhist monk.
I found very few people that latch onto that and align with it necessarily, but the price is spending your life doing things that aren't meaningful. So you have to weigh that against
Hmm.
finding meaning,
Yeah.
regardless of the economic outcome. So it's really challenging, very
Yeah.
challenging concept.
Yeah. Okay. Given that we've talked about how much needs to be overcome, and given that you're telling us the truth, given that there is a shift in the world, and the clear view of reality is business is hard. This shit is hard. And to change an entire organization or entire system is very, very difficult, if not impossible. What can a leader, a manager, or even an individual contributor inside of an organization that they believe deserves their time and energy to improve, right? So let's just say that someone has found meaningfulness, so that they have the internal energy. What can they do to move themselves and perhaps even their team in this on their own stepping stones? What's something that they might be able to do?
So individual contributors in an organization, say a typical team member, should look for opportunities to approach work in a more networked, peer networked, self-managed way. And so those could include things like, instead of having, formal behind the desk performance reviews with fellow colleagues, we just go out to lunch or dinner and talk about performance as a team. We adopt practices from other disciplines like agile teams, and we have stand-ups, and we have retros, and we engage in team type behaviors that are more networked and more directly peer-to-peer. We just find ways to bring artifacts of self-management into the workplace and do things in as self-managed a way as possible. So that's what individual contributors can do. Um, Leaders have lots of options. So if you're the leader of an organization and you have willpower and courage, and you want to make a move toward a transformed organization, then I would encourage leaders to think about organizing a retreat of some kind with the top leadership echelon of the organization, plus other influencers in the organization, and engage in some and invite them to engage in some open social technologies, open space, world cafes, authority circles, whatever it happens to be, and crowdsource some experiments and pilots that you can then launch, and have those leaders take responsibility for organizing those and measuring the results, reporting those back, and start iterating your way toward a more self-managed organization. So there are lots of options for leaders, and there are lots of ways for individual contributors as well to kind of inject more self-management practices into the ordinary work.
That's uh that's great. I mean, this has been a very inspirational conversation. Do you have some of these reference points, and tools listed on your website? Is that where folks can go?
Yes, absolutely. We have a self-management canvas that team members can use to identify the who, what, why, when, where, and how of team-based self-managed work. So we have a downloadable canvas that's free, on my website, as well as other artifacts, books, and videos, and podcasts, and all the rest. So there are definitely resources there.
All right. So if you are interested in going deeper into self-management and maybe even some soul searching, DougKirkpatrick.com is where you want to head. Doug, management provocateur, not a handler of horses, but a luminary for others to learn from. It has been a real pleasure. This is well, you got me thinking a lot. There's a lot here to unpack, Doug, and I really appreciate that you have taken on this kind of work and are spreading it because I believe so deeply in the power of humans to do amazing work. And I also believe that we're on the precipice of unlocking some incredible value that improves bottom lines and people's lives. So thank you so much for bringing that to our community on Great Mondays Radio.
Thanks, Josh. My pleasure. Appreciate it.